This is the story of the mysterious sky. It was an unusually quiet evening, the kind where the air felt thick with anticipation, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The girl and her brother were outside, sitting on the porch, their eyes fixed on the darkening sky. The stars were just beginning to twinkle into view, but tonight, something was different. "Look!" her brother whispered, pointing upwards. At first, the girl thought he was pointing at the moon, but then she saw it, faint but unmistakable, another planet, hanging in the sky, larger and closer than it had any right to be. "Is that?" she started to ask, but her voice trailed off as more planets began to appear one after another. Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, they were all there shining as brightly as the moon, their colours vivid against the dark canvas of night. "This can't be real," she murmured, her heart racing. "How can we see them like this?" Without another word, they dashed inside the house, their footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. They grabbed the telescope from her room, barely pausing to catch their breath, and rushed back outside. As they peered through the lens, their jaws dropped in awe. The planets weren't just closer, they were impossibly clear, as if they were floating just beyond reach. The girl's hands trembled as she adjusted the focus. The rings of Saturn were crisp and detailed, and she could see the swirling storms of Jupiter in vivid colour. But then, something else caught her eye. "There's something moving up there," she said, her voice tight with excitement and fear. "It's like—" Suddenly, a flash of light streaked across the sky, cutting her off. It was vibrant, almost too bright to look at, and it was being chased by a dark, shadowy figure. The light zipped back and forth, dodging the dark shape with incredible speed, as if playing a dangerous game of tag. "What is that?" her brother asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Before she could respond, there was a deafening boom, and a thick plume of smoke erupted from the direction of their backyard house. They spun around, hearts pounding, and raced towards the source of the noise. But when they arrived, there was no sign of damage, no crater, no broken windows, nothing. Was it a dream? The girl wondered aloud, her breath coming in short gasps. But as they stood in the dark, struggling to make sense of what had just happened, something inside the house caught her eye. Through the window, she saw two faint lights, small and steady, glowing in the darkness. The lights were eerily out of place, like eyes watching from the shadows. She froze, her blood turning to ice. "Did you see that?" she whispered, not daring to look away. Her brother followed her gaze, his face pale. "Yeah. And I think we need to find out what it is." With her heart in her throat, the girl slowly opened the door to her house. The darkness inside seemed thicker than usual, the air heavy with silence. They stepped in cautiously, moving towards the glowing lights. But as they approached, the lights shifted, revealing themselves to be something entirely unexpected. A small dog, its eyes shining like stars, a red collar around its neck that pulsed with a strange, otherworldly energy. As the girl and her brother stood in stunned silence, the small dog with glowing eyes continued to stare at them, its gaze almost unnerving. The red collar around its neck flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. The girl could feel her heartbeat echoing in her ears as she carefully reached out to the dog, half expecting it to vanish or transform into something else. But the dog didn't move. It simply watched her, as if waiting for something. "What? What are you?" the girl whispered, her voice trembling. She gently touched the collar, feeling the cold, smooth metal under her fingers. The collar was heavier than it looked, and as she lifted it slightly, she noticed something etched into the metal. Symbols, numbers, and what appeared to be a sequence of coordinates. "Look at this," she called to her brother, who was cautiously circling the dog, trying to get a better view. "These aren't just random markings. I think they're coordinates." "Coordinates? Like, for a place?" her brother asked, moving closer to examine the collar. "But where? And why are they on a dog?" Before they could discuss further, the collar suddenly hummed to life, and the dial in its center began to rotate. The numbers spun faster and faster, the lights growing brighter until the entire room was bathed in an eerie red glow. The dog's eyes flashed, and it let out a low growl, not of anger, but of warning. Suddenly, the room around them started to warp. The walls seemed to stretch and ripple like the surface of a pond, and the ground beneath their feet felt unstable. The girl and her brother grabbed onto each other, trying to keep their balance as the world shifted around them. Then, just as quickly as it started, the movement stopped. Everything was still again, but the room was no longer familiar. The walls were covered in strange alien symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. The air smelled different, cold and metallic, and the temperature had dropped several degrees. We're not in the house anymore, the girl stammered, her breath visible in the frigid air. The dog trotted ahead of them, seemingly unfazed by the sudden change in surroundings. It stopped in front of a large circular door made of gleaming metal. The collar on its neck pulsed with light, and the door responded, slowly sliding open with a hiss. "What is this place?" her brother whispered, his eyes wide with fear and wonder. The girl shook her head, too stunned to answer. They hesitated for a moment, but the dog gave them a look that almost seemed like encouragement. It barked softly, then trotted through the open door. With no other options and their curiosity piqued, the girl and her brother followed. They stepped into a vast chamber, its ceiling disappearing into darkness. The room was filled with towering machines and strange, glowing orbs floating in mid-air, each one projecting images of distant planets and star systems. At the center of the room was a massive console covered in more symbols and dials, all of them moving in precise rhythmic patterns. The dog leapt onto the console, its paws pressing down on a few of the symbols. The entire room came alive with light and sound as the images above them began to shift, focusing on a single point, a star system far away from Earth. I think this dog is some kind of guide," the girl realized, watching in awe as the images zoomed in on a particular planet. "And that collar, it's not just a collar. It's a device, a key to this place." Her brother nodded slowly, piecing things together. But why us? Why did it bring us here? Before they could contemplate further, a deep, resonant voice echoed through the chamber, reverberating off the walls. It wasn't speaking any language they knew, but somehow they could understand it. "Travelers," the voice intoned, "you have been chosen to restore balance. The forces that pursue this creature threaten not only your world, but many others. You must complete the mission." The girl and her brother exchanged a glance, the weight of the situation settling on their shoulders. They had no idea what was truly at stake or what their mission entailed, but they knew they couldn't turn back now. "What do we do?" her brother asked, his voice shaking. The dog looked up at them, its eyes filled with a strange, ancient wisdom. It barked once more, this time with a sense of urgency. The images above them shifted again, showing a dark, ominous figure, like the one they had seen in the sky, growing larger and closer to the distant planet. "We follow the dog," the girl said, determination in her voice. "We follow the coordinates, and we stop whatever's coming." With the dog leading the way, they stepped back through the door, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them in the unknown.